missile forces to show that they have the ability to interfere with the systems, that they can activate the missiles.
We as a crew were never to speak about this again. And we were told that essentially it never happened. Those were the words that were used.
During the same time period, similar incidents were occurring at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. Ellsworth, like many missile sites, has an outer zone and an inner zone. An outer zone alert can happen frequently, a cow rubbing against the fence, a flock of birds, but an inner zone alert, or an IZ alert, is very serious because it means something is directly above the missile capsule.
I was on duty at Echo, which is our squadron command post, and we had an OZine and IZine call it. The strike crew is upstairs, 3 to 5 miles away, and they jumped in their trucks and went roaring out there and called me back and said, "Sir, for lack of a better description of the flying saucer hovering over that missile, and there's a beam of reddish light going down to it." Over the next few weeks, suddenly we had an influx of black Huey helicopters, completely unmarked. I walked up to one of them. There wasn't. They had to have a file somewhere written on there, but you couldn't find the tail number. And these crews in dark clothes, young, sharp men, obviously ex-military, I would guess NSA, I don't know, I never knew. But then they left, and when everything slowed down, they disappeared, and we never got any feedback from the results. To this day, I'd love to know what they captured during that time, because they were constant. This went on constantly at this time for about 3 months.
These sightings weren't limited to nuclear bases in the United States. Take the Bentwaters Rendlesham Forest incident in England.
That was the largest group of tactical nuclear weapons being stored in Western Europe.
And they were really cagey about that for a long time after the case.
The official policy to this day, as my understanding, is that the Air Force will neither confirm or deny the exact location of stored nuclear weapons.
Lieutenant Colonel Charles Hall detailed the entire incident in a memo to the UK Ministry of Defense. He said that a security patrol saw strange lights descending into the nearby Rendlesham Forest. A group of servicemen entered the forest to investigate. One of the witnesses was a U.S. Air Force sergeant named Jim Penniston. Not only do you have multiple witnesses, but you also have one of the witnesses claiming to have been taken on board a craft and speaking to these alien beings.
You're talking about Burroughs and Penniston, these two security policemen who saw this triangular-shaped craft in the woods.
Penniston says he approached a triangular black metallic craft that was approximately the size of a pickup truck and was emitting bright lights and a strange energy. He stated that he touched the surface of the craft, noting smooth, glass-like material and unusual symbols etched on its side that resembled hieroglyphs. According to Penniston, he experienced a profound telepathic download of binary code after touching the craft. He then transcribed this binary code into a notebook, which was reportedly decoded years later to reveal cryptic messages.
Origin year 8100.
I have not focused on that. Everyone knows the case. They've given multiple interviews and so on. But what I did from the outset was I knew that it was called a WSA, a weapons storage area, was at the Bentwaters, RAF Bentwaters base, and that there were reports that surfaced of one of the objects, aerial objects, hovering above the WSA and sending beams of light down into it. Now, Colonel Hall, when I interviewed him back in 2005, said he was out in the woods with this team. Everybody probably, a lot of people have seen these accounts where he's in the woods, he's got his tape recorder, they see this object that looks like an eyeball moving through the woods, and then they see objects in the sky, one of which hovers over he and his team of security policemen, and it fires down a beam of light at their feet, and they jump back and they go, are we being attacked? Is this a warning? What's going on here? Well, he was several miles, he said a couple of miles from the weapons storage area, but he heard on the radio that he had that security policeman back at the weapons storage area were reporting an object hovering above the weapons storage area, sending down beams of light. I tried to find and interview one of the security policemen who actually saw the beams coming down. I was unsuccessful in that regard. What I did succeed in getting were a couple of guys on the record saying that there was an object that was a multicolored disc quite near them, quite large, and one of them said that when it was brought to his attention, he turned around, he saw something that looked like a rod or an antenna from the bottom of the craft retracting into the craft, and what I surmise is that antenna or rod probably released the beam when his back was turned, and by the time he had returned, the beam was gone and the rod was retracting into the craft. What I did independently succeed in doing was interviewing a retired colonel who was involved with NATO weapons security. He has not given me permission to use his name, but I know his background, his credentials. And what he said was when he was with NATO weapons security, he was aware that shortly after this incident, 2 tactical nuclear bombs were removed from a bunker at Bentwaters, flown aboard a C-5A aircraft to Kirtland Air Force Base, where there's a weapons lab, Air Force weapons lab, and that those weapons were analyzed, presumably to see whether any the beams had impacted them in any manner, compromised their functionality or whatever, I'm presuming.
I never had a feeling of it being extraterrestrial. It's always been that they were simply us in the future.
And Jim Peniston's career took sort of a hit after this too, is that right?
Jim Penniston, and I believe Burroughs too, but certainly Jim Penniston said that he was subjected to like sodium pentothal, some kind of drug was administered to him. He was questioned.
Sodium pentothal, that's like an MK Ultra thing.
It's
a truth serum.
commonly known as true serum.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, Penniston is on record as saying he was administered something that was clearly designed to affect his mental state while he was being interrogated, so he couldn't fabricate or potentially not tell the truth, is the inference of what I've read of him saying publicly. But he said that there were British intelligence and Air Force intelligence in the room when this was being conducted on him.
One of the other witnesses, John Burroughs, a U.S. Air Force airman, also experienced physical and psychological effects. And Burroughs had some lingering effects around his brain, possibly the dorsal striatum, the caudate and putamen of his brain. Is that right? There was some scarring there?
And his heart. I mean, he's had heart issues, so I don't know the details, but yeah, he had physical effects, certainly.
Basically, that would be a result of high electromagnetic radiation.
Conceivably, yes.